Welcome to Journey Through the Eyes, the EMDR podcast, the podcast that is here to unveil and explore the transformative power of EMDR therapy. Here at Journey Through the Eyes, our mission is to support both new and seasoned clinicians with those powerful and critical conversations and provide resources about EMDR therapy and building your private practice. I am one of your hosts. I'm Tamera J. Brown, licensed professional counselor and EMDR trained therapist with Arise Psychotherapy and Coaching Services here in the beautiful city of San Antonio, Texas. And I'm so thrilled to introduce our co-host, Miss Kathy Couch.
Hello, how are you? So today we are talking about EMDR and brain spotting and the mechanisms of action that we have in both of the protocols. There's also ART, accelerated resolution therapy, that use a mechanism of action with the bilateral stimulation. But today we're honored to have our guest speaker today, Chris Berryman. She's fabulous, and we're working with her on helping her become EMDR certified. She's an LCSW in Grand Rapids, Michigan, also licensed in a few other states, Wisconsin, Indiana, and we're just happy to have her here. She's an LCSW working with kids, adoption, trauma, and attachment. So Chris, let's kind of start us off, and we're just lead us down the road of how you got started with brain spotting.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, I began my brain spotting journey during COVID, just needing that training, and trying to find trainings that were online. And I had a colleague in Indianapolis, where I was living at the time, who is really big into the brain spotting community. And I just got really connected to her, and she recommended brain spotting, and my journey started with that. And my first brain spotting training during the COVID period. And I just sort of have been running with it since. I recently have completed my requirements for brain spotting certification. And so I guess I'm really working on 2 certifications this year, for my EMDR certification and my brain spotting one. And I use both of them pretty frequently in my practice. And so I'm excited about sharing about what brain spotting is.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a conversation, because we're always looking at different modalities that affect the brain and how can we advance healing quicker. Can you tell us a little bit about the basics of brain spotting?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in brain spotting, so I just wanted to preface with that. But brain spotting was developed in 2003 by David Grand.
Okay.
And he's actually an EMDR trained therapist. But he noticed working with a professional skater, when he was working with her, because she couldn't do a specific technique on the ice, and he was finding that she had a mental block. And so he was working with her and found that her eye, when they were talking about something, her eye would move or twitch. And so he sort of took that and sort of explored more about why was that happening? And just continued to do his work with the skater. And eventually she was able to do the move that she was blocked with. And so he started brain spotting. And brain spotting is a lot about, it's very similar to EMDR, but there's a lot of main differences as well. That brain spotting, is based on a fixed eye position, whereas EMDR is the bilateral, right? Your eyes are moving.
Okay.
So I think that's probably one of the biggest differences, is that, with brain spotting, you're holding a brain spot. So a brain spotting trained therapist would help a client find a brain spot. And a brain spot is basically a place where you're activated, where it's an eye placement where you feel activation in your body.
Wow,
And the brain spotting therapist would hold that eye position. So it's a fixed eye position.
How do you find that position? Can you describe that method for us?
Yeah. So there's two models for brain spotting. There's a resource model and then there's the activation model. So typically, like I use the activation model a lot. So a client would come in and they would say, like, I'm really frustrated. I got cut off in traffic or whatever, something that just sort of, and so they would you could see them getting really activated about it, like really upset about it. So the brain spotting person would they have like I mean, I use a pointer, so it's nothing really technical about like the equipment. And you would just sort of put that in the line of vision and
Okay.
there's different techniques, but the brain spot is where the eye position where they feel the most activated.
Oh,
Wow.
So I would be like, where do you feel that in your body? They may be like, I feel like in my throat. When you keep the pointer right here. So there's different techniques on finding the brain spot. That's like a really general way to find a brain spot. There's multiple brain spots. And I don't know if, I feel like the way I explain it to clients is that everybody, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but like if you ask somebody a question, like you say like, hey, what did you have for dinner last night? A lot of people will look to a certain direction. They might be like, oh yeah, I went and had spaghetti. Like
right.
those eye movements. So when you're moving your eyes, you're actually locating a brain spot to remember something.
Okay, I'm familiar with that too because mine go down and left when I'm processing. I know I look to the left and I can feel it encoding information and processing. I just know that about myself. So if I'm looking down and left, I'm like, okay, that's
Yeah.
uh, going into some sort of memory. So
Yeah.
I know that about myself.
Yes. Yeah. So there's tons, like I mean, I know a lot of clients are like, what if I don't find the brain spot? And there's multiple brain spots, so it's not like, we're spending a lot of time finding that specific one. It's just really a place where you find the most activation if you're using like the activation model of brain spotting. And then there's like a resource one. So tell me where you feel, um, you know, positive, like, and let's grow that. So it's a lot of,
Wow.
the EMDR part, is like, tell me where you feel the most calm, so,
Mhm.
um,
Well,
yeah. So
this is really amazing and very interesting because I'm super fascinated with the brain and body, especially for us as mental health clinicians. I think that our field is growing and evolving, and I'm so proud that we are doing so much more work with the brain body connection. And so, when you hear, I'm interested in hearing, Chris, like when you share that you do brain spotting with people, are they usually taken aback, or they like, how do you approach or communicate, or what have you run into when trying to share, I provide brain spotting therapy, or what are people's, or clients most reaction to that? Because I know at EMDR they're like, what? Most of the time they get scared and think we hypnotizing them and things like that. So what is your experience with that?
yeah, I feel like it's very similar to EMDR. You're just sort of like, being like really shocked. I'm like, why did my brain like, why did it go here? Why did it go there? And and your brain just needs to go where it needs to go. But yeah, I feel like it's the same. A lot of brain spotting focuses a lot on the body. So a lot of times
Mm,
people will notice like, wow, I felt like this pressure in my chest, but now it's at the bottom of my feet. Or I'm noticing lots of heat here, so it just like these sensations just travel through, and so travel through your body throughout your processing. And so I think it's really interesting. A lot of people, so brain spot, I mean, so brain spotting is not, there's no protocol for brain spotting, which is another big difference between brain spotting and EMDR is like, EMDR has got the 8 phases. Brain spotting is very organic. Like somebody can just come in and you can do a brain spotting session like right after you really just build rapport with somebody. Like you don't have to do like setting up the memories. Um, but a lot of people don't really care for that. Some people don't like that because it's too organic or too not structured enough. Some clients like that structure, right? Like um the brain spotting therapist is very you're attuned with them, you're holding the space with them, but you're not participating in their processing other than just saying like, I'm here with you. You're not going like, let's go with that or any of any of that stuff. There's no interweaves or any of that.
What do you see in comparison, just as a therapist, sort of in the outcomes of providing each intervention? Does one accelerate healing? Are you noticing different results when administering both of these? Can you describe that for us?
I mean, I haven't kept track of any like data, but I do know
Right.
that I've had clients who, depending on like they're like a lot of times like EMDR is really well known. So a lot of times, they come in, they want EMDR. Sometimes when they talk about something, I notice that they're actually brain spotting. So they're actually like staring off somewhere and talking about their trauma. So
Okay.
it's like, wow, like, why don't you just hold that spot and like see what comes up? So a lot of times I think it just depends on the person and their trauma.
Mhm.
And because I have a client who likes to have everything really organized and contained. And brain spotting is one of those things where like it might just sort of end not as contained until next time. It's like there's no like, let's put it in the container, or you can do some grounding things, but brain spotting is very, I guess, like the term is like organic. It's you sort of just, let's just go with it. So I feel like it depends on the client, whether like the healing process, how long it takes. And
Sounds like there's more observation of the eyes as well in that, that sort of, you said I was able to locate the brain spot. So I mean, in EMDR, we do a lot of reflection there as well, but that seems to be an attunement to them
yeah,
as well, right? And
yeah.
helping them recognize within themselves about where that is located.
Yeah, I mean, and brain spotting, and I feel like because I am EMDR trained, I always I always listen for like core beliefs. But we don't start with a core belief, or we might start with a traumatic memory, but I don't say like, what's the worst part? What does that mean about you?
There's no
It's just,
baseline measures or anything like that.
yeah, it'll just be like, tell me about the traumatic memory. Where do you feel that in your body? I take a SUD, and then we just process it. I mean, there's different techniques for brain spotting, but we just process it, and your brain just goes where it needs to go, just like EMDR. It's like the free association. Your brain just goes there.
Describe for us a little bit about sort of, you've been initially trained and then you described the certification process. Could you share with our listeners a little bit about, so we know the protocol, we have a basic understanding. Can you talk about their process for being where you are today?
For brain spotting, there's different phase trainings. There's like a phase 1, which is like the basic, after phase 1, you can actually, do some brain spotting with clients. And phase 2 is another one where you learn more setups, so no more techniques.
And that's
And
training, a separate training in phase
yeah,
2. So
yeah.
phase 1's the initial training,
Yep.
and then
One,
phase 2.
and then phase 2, and then there's some specialty trainings. So there's some that are like a freeze to thaw. So like that's like storing trauma in the body. There's an adopt. I mean, I specialize in adoption, so I have I've been to an adoption brain spotting training. But for certification, you need phase 1 and phase 2, and then you need 6 hours of consultation with a certified brain spotter, and at least 50 hours of using brain spotting and various brain spotting techniques on clients. So
Okay, and
that's
how long are each of the phases of the training? Is it, I know with EMDR, it's 3-day, well, 6 days of training, 40 hours. How is that training for, how many hours for each of those phases?
If I remember, the phase 1 and phase 2 are like a Friday through Sunday. So it's, a good 36 hours, I would say 8 times 8, 24 hours.
Is that for both phase 1 and 2? Is that what I heard you?
Phase 1 is, yeah, they're probably each like 24 hours.
So it's
Yeah.
similar to the setup, a little bit
Yeah.
less, but similar in the setup. And a certification, the highest you can go with brain spotting, or is there more frameworks for moving forward in that area after that?
You can be like a certified trainer, a sort of, and a consultant, just like the sort of like the EMDR. You can, be a consultant. A lot of people, are bringing more brain spotting, you know, more techniques into the field. So it's definitely a growing field, like brain spotting. It's behind, I feel like it's behind EMDR in like the research for sure. And also like the techniques, and the robustness of the EMDR and the protocols for EMDR, but for brain spotting, I feel like the brain, I don't know, I as a brain spotter, I wouldn't think of a specific protocol for a phobia. I would just sort of find the brain spot and
Okay.
process, right?
Right.
So it's different in that it's not as structured, and I think that sort of makes it where there's a lot of setups for brain spots, like a lot of techniques, but it's not like an EMDR, I feel
Right.
like.
The protocol.
You know,
Yes.
the thing that I find interesting in this, Chris, and it just is just so intriguing, because all of the things that you were talking about, clients and the energy that they feel oftentimes in their foot. Had a client yesterday had all of those somatic symptoms under the arms, in the foot, and of course, as an EMDR therapist, let's go with that.
Mhm.
Right, go with that. And while she was doing, and I was just there, and I was just with her in the session, and I was thinking about resourcing, right, while she was processing, just while I'm noticing her. And as I'm an EMDR trained therapist, and it's still just very much so growing. And what I'm hearing from you with brain spotting, I love how you shared it was natural and organic,
Yeah.
because I love that part that I feel EMDR brings to the table for our clients. Is just this organic, natural, allowing your brain and your body to go where and do what it needs to do without us, kind of being involved in that way. That helps that natural, organic healing to take place within the client. And it sounds like that brain spotting offers that as well. So, with the from, like, I guess, like a trauma perspective, for example, right? Because if brain spotting doesn't necessarily have a structure, right? What would you say, like, if a client, comes in, because the trauma theory is you got to create calm before exposing, the client to, the trauma or what have you. So if a client comes in and let's say they had a recent trauma event or what have you, what would be the approach with brain spotting? Like, can you still use that, or do you have to go to a more structured type of protocol, if I'm making sense here?
Yeah, no, you're making sense. I think, I would definitely, you have to screen for like dissociation.
Okay.
Um, I would definitely make sure, what kind of resources do they have already? So a lot of it too is just like, making sure they have the coping skills, the support. But there's, instead of an activation spot, like where they're totally activated, like that would be, like I would do something more of, there's like a one-eyed brain spotting technique where you can do like with one eye, and you can find the one eye that's less activated. So you can be really, you can really tone it down until it's very gentle, instead of to what you think the client can handle. So, or
Okay.
maybe a resource spot,
Hmm.
and you could do like there's like double spots, right? Like there, like this almost reminds me of like the interweaves. It's like, well, there's part of you that wants this, part of you that wants that, and your eyes can you find the brain spots for each of those, and your eyes, the brain spotter would say, like, you just go where your eyes need to go, whatever spots. And so you can find like a spot that's really resourcing or positive, and then you can find the one that's really activating. And so your eyes they would just naturally, whatever they internally need would go to those spots.
Okay. I got a juicy question, Chris, because this sounds really powerful. I mean, because as therapists, and this would be interesting to hear how both of you beautiful ladies hear about this. I know for me as a therapist, the one of my primary values is I want to be competent and effective. I value when clients come and see us. I really want to see them get a result or a transformation, or as Dr. Sue Johnson says, that when clients come to us, they need to experience some level of change in the session. So it
Yeah.
sounds like brain spotting is another tool like EMDR that can help clients to come into the session and really leave with an organic and tangible result, right? For you, as a therapist, what does that do for you, right? With when clients come in and they're super activated, and here you got this brain spotting technique that you don't have to do all, you don't have to do all the extra. You can just say, okay, friend, let's do this. What does that do for you and your role or your identity as a therapist to be able to offer that and navigate that with clients?
I mean, that's a great question, because I think that for me as a therapist, I've learned, as a brain spotting therapist, I've learned to be able to be okay with silence. There's an
Mm,
acronym in the brain spotting world that's called WAIT, and it's why am I talking? And so the brain spotting there, we're just holding space, and, we're just like, I'm here, like you're just sort of being encouraging as they go through their internal process. A lot of times you don't even like, I guess the beauty too of brain spotting is that I don't need to know the specifics of the trauma. Like I can do a brain
wow.
spotting and they can internally process it. So I don't, which is really great for somebody who's had some trauma that's really shaming. Um,
Mm,
so it's really interesting because the EMDR, the therapist plays an active role. We're like, like, what are you noticing? Like, go with that. And if are you looping, or we might have to do an interweave. With brain spotting, it's a lot of it is just sitting with the client and not speaking. And I think that's still a struggle for me sometimes, is just going like, okay, I
mhm,
don't need to, I'm not supposed to talk actually.
mhm,
Uh,
mhm.
But
That's incredible.
watching that process is very beautiful, just watching them
Mm,
just sort of like breathe, yawn, whatever they need to move their body, just sort of need to like get that release. And you just like, they end the session, they're like, I just feel so loose and calm. And I'm like, awesome.
So
Yeah.
my question is, are you seeing the results, maintaining sustained change after that session you're speaking of? Do they come back and say, yeah, this progress has maintained itself generally, or is it something that you may need to revisit?
I mean, I think like, just like with EMDR, I always go back to the target. Like I know that's not part of the brain spotting protocol, because the brain spotting protocol, or not protocol, would say like, what do you want to work on? But for me, I always, like, hey, how is it going for you? How was this
Right.
week? How did you, even like I might email them throughout the week, how did you tolerate this if they're new to brain spotting? Like, how are you doing? But yeah, I feel like there's long lasting change. I mean, I feel like just like with EMDR, there's lots of, you might be opening up a branch or a thread, and it's sort of connected to a big ball of, something else that you sort of have to go to. So a lot of times it's, you're touching upon, a lot of, you might be touching upon like something really basic, and then maybe you get some, core roots, some pre-verbal stuff, or that sort of needs to, have multiple sessions for.
You
Yeah.
go that deep on pre-verbal with this, huh?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for
Wow.
sure.
Oh, I
Yeah.
mhm,
love
I
it.
get to have a bit adopted, just like having some pre-verbal, remembering loss of biological parents, remembering, you know, seeing themselves, with their biological mom, and, no longer, so lots of grief, but oh yeah, definitely some pre-verbal.
Yeah, so I was spent, 5, almost 6 years in child welfare. I always have a love for child welfare. And that, it wasn't the babies that would cry when they came in and they were removed. It was the babies that didn't, right?
Yeah.
And like they're just seeing their world go around. So pre-verbal work is really important.
Yeah.
Those cases specifically because of the neglect and abuse and the environments that they're in. Uh,
Yeah.
Often don't get their needs met. So uh, even generational trauma, we can go back sometimes in our conscious brain, but even here, sometimes the pre-verbal, was there a story about your birth that was traumatic? Or, I know with my daughter, when I had her, I was in labor like 36 hours, and, it was just the nurse that came in and said, let's roll this baby over like a hot dog. And she was here 2 hours later. It was just that
wow.
environment, right? That stimulation. I was like, oh, I can relax. And she was here in 2 hours.
Yep.
And so it just, that story, for her, uh, might be important as we're talking about pre-verbal trauma. Just curious, what kind of experiences have you had doing that work?
I mean, a lot of like, kids remembering being dropped off. Like I had somebody who was adopted from from India, and just remembering being dropped off,
Mm,
Okay.
being remembered, being carried and left. One remembers reaching out to their mom, not, and not, being taken away. So
Oh.
mhm.
I know it's, yeah.
Yeah, the
Wow.
grief, right? That attachment, when people always go back to their birth families, no matter how traumatic they are. I think that was what amazed me is in our adult brains, we understand why sometimes these decisions are made, but then the biological connection that they always seek out that source of their life forever. That never.
Yeah, that primal wound.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that
Yeah.
for them and doing that work. I know it's something I'm interested in, not necessarily skilled at, but I definitely think it's, developmental trauma is huge,
Mhm.
especially where is it stored? And it's just amazing you can go that deep in those memories, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's incredible because as I'm listening to you, Chris, I think that you are super amazing, especially in working with kids and things. I don't know about y'all, but for me, we got folks we play well with out here.
Yeah,
And I love working with women. And I discovered about myself that trying to provide therapy and support for the little people has always been a challenge for me, because it's like, again, my modus operandi, my mission is I want to help them get results. And it sounds like this therapy, and I know there's lots of clinicians too who do EMDR with children. I salute them because
yeah.
I'm like, whew, but to be able to use brain spotting, in this kind of way, and it just sounds like it's gentle and you know,
Non-invasive way, right? I didn't mean it
yeah,
like a
yeah,
non-invasive
yeah. Non-invasive,
way.
beautiful word. Beautiful word. Non-invasive way to be able to support clients. And Chris, I loved how you mentioned the shame. Because I know EMDR is my jam. I love the therapy model. I love the work of Dr. Francine Shapiro. Kathy and I were talking about her. I was like, Dr. Francine was just a doggone champion, you
Sure.
know. But what I notice is, again, sometimes clients come in, and because I'm still growing as a therapist and as a, EMDR trained therapist, I notice a lot of some of the things you described in the activation. And then I'm trying to, in my own practice, build a resource. And I know every client is different, right? But trying to find those resourcing techniques that actually will get the client's results and really will target those specific areas in the brain, right? Because it's like, clients will sometimes, and I blame it, y'all, on the floaty thing I just call society. I put healthy blame out there. That's my strategy of putting healthy blame on. A lot of times, just we as human beings, we go to school and we get information, but we get told take care of your brain and exercise, but
Yeah,
we don't talk about how it works. And me on my soapbox, it's like, here we are though, driving vehicles and operating laptops, and we understand some of the hardware components, even if we're not skilled in it. In the car, we know not to put bananas and sugar to fill the tank. But
yeah,
when it comes to the brain and body, there's just so much we clients and even some clinicians are not aware of, but we're struggling to help clients to get the common results. And this just sounds like this is um, human beings are beautiful. I forgot the name of the gentleman who you said have been doing the research and has brought this, what sounds like a beautiful gift to the mental health industry, and being able to serve clients in a way that when they do come in, because with EMDR, it's like you want to help clients to get that safety. And as clinicians, we're here to provide and I love holding space. But sometimes clients still, they don't always go there, and they don't want to open up because of the shame. And so this to me sounds like a non-invasive way to provide them with the support and what I call that inner sanctuary where their brain and body in them, they can just do the work. And then we just get to be the healer and the guide and the beautiful witnessing. I think it's just I don't know about y'all, but for our audience, because we are both here for clients and also for new and seasoned clinicians. And I would love for us to share on that, right? What is that like for you to be the witness of such an incredible, what I call the healing phenomenon, to witness that kind of transformation? What does that do for your soul, as a healer in this, in the field we're in?
You there, Chris?
Yeah, I'm just like sort of pondering that, 'cause I just had that experience yesterday. And so I just sort of was thinking about that. And I just feel really honored and sometimes unworthy but
Yeah.
also really privileged. I think it's a
Mm.
mixture, you know, of being there through somebody's journey and even in brain spotting, not even knowing what it is, because you're sort of like, you just know they're going through something, you just don't know what it is. But just watching that process and it's like it's an honor. And I think I mean, I know that's like a cliche word, but I think that part of it is very humbling, but it's also so difficult. It's a lot. It can take a lot out of you too. So I think it's just a mixture. I think, self-care definitely is important. Um, Even though, you're going through, a healing process with somebody, and it's a beautiful experience. It's just, sometimes it takes a lot of energy to hold that space.
Oh, can we
Yeah, I
talk
wanted
about
to
that?
say,
Yeah.
I wanted to say a couple of things here because, so I'm trying to, bring basic training out here to Idaho, and I'm gonna compete in this competition called the Idaho Entrepreneur Challenge. I did it last year, and you have to describe to this audience what is EMDR in a very basic way. And so I've been really thinking about what you're saying of how do we describe this change. And I was reading in the basic text, the EMDR protocol, the third edition. And it just basically said, Francine basically said, people want to know, and they ask us, what is the method of action? How does this actually work in the brain? And her response was, how do we know what any psychotherapy does to the brain? There's no way to view the outcome. All we can measure is emotions, behavior, and sustained change. And so that is really the foundation of psychotherapy. And that's what I would say to the skeptics is, have an EMDR experience or a brain spotting experience, because this is an experience and we can theoretically lay the foundations and the frameworks and the protocols. Come in, I invite you to have a session and be witnessed, right? Be witnessed and have that transformation, because it's kind of difficult to put into words, isn't it? How to
Mhm.
describe the change and that measure that outcome. But the healing phenomenon that you're talking about is really what the foundation of EMDR is, and what Dr. Shapiro found in her own walk in the park. And
Mhm.
so if we can harness that, and I can teach people how to create spaces for that in their own businesses and replicate that on a macro level, boom, right out of the park.
Mhm.
And that's not to
Mhm.
say, there won't be other methodologies or interventions coming in the future, but for right now, this is where it's at with EMDR and brain spotting and accelerated resolution therapy. We're really understanding what's going on in the psyche and the brain a little bit better. And so I'm really excited to be on the forefront and to lead this experience for people, because think about just even us three here today, all the people that we shift and change and then they replicate that. It's just an amazing thing, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that you said something that is really incredible, and I'm so honored to be in this space with you ladies, because the Chris said something that I think is critical, right? Which is we get to witness this beautiful thing, and we get to show up in helping families in our community to bring more light, more healing, and more. That is an honor. And I just salute you, Chris, on sharing how sometimes you don't feel worthy. Me too. It's almost like I cannot believe, and then how do you communicate that? How do how do you communicate? But then also realizing it's not just the beauty and the brilliance and what I feel is the divinity of the healing and transformation we witness, but it's also very tough.
Mhm.
It can be very difficult. And my concern, because I was there myself, is I was on the journey trying to figure how to help, doing CBT and all the stuff, and watching clients, and then I'm feeling ineffective.
Yeah.
But I didn't practice taking care of myself either. I wasn't in that space. And so what do you do, Chris, for yourself with, because in my view, and I pay respect to all methodology, I know that there's not one, right? That, just like Kathy was mentioned, there's so many that we can offer that can get the clients the result. But when you think about the real deeper work that we're doing with therapies like EMDR and brain spotting, and the energy that comes in and how we experience that interchange and all that, what do you do, Chris, to take care of you, to be able to have the capacity to hold that space for human beings?
I mean, I do a variety of things, but I have my own brain spotting therapist, so I get brain
Mhm.
spotted
Good.
a lot. And then family, I seek supervision a lot, just sort of like processing things with other therapists in a setting where I know that it's confidential, but also where I'm going to be validated and understood. I do lots of exercise. But yeah, that's probably it. I need to, it's winter here in Michigan, so hopefully we'll get some more snow, but I'd like to do some snow things, but just sort of enjoying nature. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, brains. I think having my own therapist has been really helpful.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
Beautiful.
just from my experience, I was in child welfare from the very beginning of my career, so I was exposed to frontline trauma, and I don't know, that set me up for success because I don't know if I was able to deal with those harder situations in a way. My brain just was able to process that, so I really did have to be diligent of like, I'm turning off my phone. I am, just what are you doing for self-care? I'm gonna go home and pet my dog, or hey,
right.
Kathy, can you come out? And somebody told me, right in your day planner, I'm booked, If somebody asks you to do something between these times, I'm booked. And self-care doesn't just have to be like, I'm going to get a massage. It can be drinking good water, eating good food. I'm diabetic, so, eating a salad instead of the burger, or protein, or buying whatever. So just really for therapists out there, validating for yourself the small things, because when you look at self-care, it can become gargantuan, right? And it's like, no, what are you doing? I just took 5 minutes to breathe. That's self-care. I went out and smelled the air, or I was mindful and petting my dog, or I really looked at this tree, or watch my children laugh, or those sorts of things I think are very imperative for the clinicians to experience. That's validating self-care. Doesn't watering my plants, doesn't have to be,
Mhm.
something huge. Right.
Mhm. And I love that, Kathy, because my whole mantra, right, this year is that mental health and self-care is not a luxury. And I think that having this conversation, and I'm so grateful that we're doing this and talking about this in such a human way, right? Because we don't recognize, or sometimes self-care or even doing mental health is viewed as a luxury. I'll do it when, I'll do it if, but it's those small things. I had such a amazing session yesterday with a young woman, but she's a mom and suffered loss. And when mommies go through losing a child, I'm a mom, and my heart was so with her. And when I got done, I was like, oh my gosh. So I went ahead on, and in my house, I went ahead on and danced. I found a YouTube video, and I did some feminine dance just to move the energy and just to kind of reconnect and just to kind of surrender. And so having these things, these tools that are right in front of us in our natural organic environments, and being able to share with other clinicians and also remind ourselves those things matter. right? Let's not minimize, just those small moments and those small things that are really in our reach, and they don't have to be luxurious.
It's fun because I have twin boys that are 3, almost 4, and they're just, on it. And I have a 7-year-old, and we do that, we've been watching the Mario movie lately, and it's like, they have a song in there. We're like, let's dance. And, it's, go baby, go. And you'll take turns. And so thank you for that. That was validating for me, because we can just dance and have fun with them. And watching a 3-year-old that's just uninhibited, 2 of them at the same time, it's like, this is crazy, but this is so fun.
Isn't it? Yes, I love it. I love it. Um, I wanted to ask Chris, because, and before we go, just because you're doing this, it sounds like a beautiful balance or interweave, if you will, beautiful marriage of EMDR and brain spotting. For you, you know, how do you, which is there a go-to for you, or do you just kind of say, based on what the client is coming in for, I will just tailor what they need in that moment between the two? Or how do you kind of navigate the marriage that you're doing between those two beautiful therapies?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think what I typically do, a lot of times I'll just get referrals just because of EMDR. So typically I'll just do EMDR. But a lot of times if somebody isn't sure, I send out a couple videos, like YouTube videos explaining it. And then I just sort of say, like, let's talk about it. What do you think will fit? What sort of fits your personality? And just because you pick one, but just because we decide to go to one doesn't mean that we can't do the other, So I think that I start with, basically what the clients, like I talked about the pros and cons about, like, brain spotting is very organic. And if you like structure, you might want to do EMDR, or if it's something of trauma you don't want to talk about, then maybe brain spotting, so I feel like it, but I typically send like some videos on, like, what is EMDR and what is brain spotting. And then sort of let them get just exposed to that. And then just sort of talk details about, like, what might that look like for them.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That is amazing. I'm so inspired and intrigued. I really
Yeah.
am. Yeah, I want to be able to have a, great um, models, pathways for clients to come in and to be able to get the healing and the growth that they really deserve. So I think that this was just amazing conversation today.
Yeah,
I
well, thank you
appreciate
for
you
having
out
me.
there. I have an affinity for Michigan. I went to U of M. And
Mhm.
so, I have an affinity for people out there in Michigan. I know what those winters can be like.
Yeah.
And when I went there, it's like, oh, Idaho has snow. No, Idaho doesn't have snow like this.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I wish you well out there in the winter. I wanted to just know that we see you and appreciate you, and extend a lot of good natured hope for your practice and yourself.
Thank you.
And you matter to us, and just really appreciate your time having this conversation. One of my values is, giving back to the field. So I appreciate that in you and your willingness to share with us today.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
And so let's talk real quick. Where can we find you, Miss Chris? Where can the folks find you?
I am currently in a private practice group in Zeeland, Michigan, which is a suburb of Holland, and it's called Headwaters Counseling. And you should be able to Google Headwaters Counseling in Google, and put, like, Michigan and Zeeland, and it should pop right up. And you should be able to find me.
She's licensed in 5 states, y'all. So
So she's doing big
Well,
things.
licensed a lot states. I've moved to quite a bit.
Doing big
don't
things.
let
And
those licenses go, though.
I'm not going to let the
yes.
licenses go. They're too valuable.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then, Miss Chris, do you have any social media? Can they find you on social media?
I no, not really. Just through Headwaters Counseling, which is on Facebook. You can definitely find me there. But other than that, I just sort of low key with that.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah. Or you can get a hold of me through Kathy or you guys,
Yeah.
if that's, but
And you can send us whatever information you'd like for us to publish on the podcast, and I can link it in the chat.
Okay.
So, and put whatever those details are for our listeners here, and they can find you that way as well. So
I will definitely put my I'll send you my contact information and you can forward it on.
great. All right.
All right.
So amazing. Well, we are so grateful. Thank you to all of our listening audience, to Chris, to Kathy, to all the folks and people who are tuning in. Again, we're here to encourage, inspire, and inform our community. And, we just want to hold space for your growth in your evolution in private practice as clinicians. And so, Kathy, you go on and take us out and tell us what's new, Rewired 360.
Oh, girl. So yeah, what's coming up is I just came up with my plan, my training plan. So we're gonna do 2 EMDR refresher courses. I am actualizing my vision of having one local here in Twin Falls, Idaho. I
Awesome.
have found a colleague that's gonna help me do that, and then there'll be an on-demand one at the end of March. And then my grief and loss trainings, I have one April 19th and June 6th. So those are what I'm focusing on so far. I want to do a documentation seminar at some point, but that's in the works. So we're getting those CEU credits going. So I am working on being able to offer MDRIA credits and then also CEs for those trainings. So that's where my focus is now, but also opening up our EMDR University for certification and consultation for EMDR for therapists. So if you're interested in consulting, join us, and we would be happy to help you there and build your skills and clinical practice. And then we got my baby's birthday parties coming up. So that's what I got on my plate. We're so happy to have you. You can visit me at www.rewire360, Tamera Arise Psychotherapy LLC. And we will see you here next week. We publish these every Friday at 6 a.m. So share with your audience. We'd love to have our community on this podcast expand. So please like and follow and share.
We are so grateful. See you next Friday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.